Hello, how you doing and welcome back to the channel. What does 2024 and beyond look like for the All Blacks? Defeated in the World Cup final, quite a few changes in playing personnel, in coaching, loads to get into in this video as I cast my eye forward to look at some of the big questions that are facing the All Blacks as they look ahead into the future. Make sure you drop a comment down below, let me know what you make of it, let me know what you make of the positions that I've focused on, the various questions that I've posed, and also like the video, but most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you do not miss a thing. Let's get into it. So I started this mini-series the other week or so where going through various different international teams and looking at the key questions facing them as we cast our eyes forward. So I spoke about Wales, and now it is the All Blacks' turn. So the first thing I start doing when I look at these videos is look at what their teams were, what their starting 15s and what their 23s were through the Rugby World Cup. So this is who Ian Foster went with for the All Blacks. I think by the time they got to that final, there were no huge surprises, as you would probably expect when a team's got to a World Cup final. They know their best players, they know the combinations that they want to go with. What starts to paint a more interesting picture, though, is if I flick it onto the next slide, all those names in red are no longer available for the All Blacks heading forward. So Aaron Smith, Dane Coles and Sam Whitelock have all retired. That's a hell of a lot of experience that they are losing there. Brodie Retallick is off to Japan. I don't think he's officially retired from what I've been able to work out anyway, but we probably don't expect to see him playing for the All Blacks again, certainly not in the near future. Richie Mo'unga, likewise, he's got a multi-year deal to play in Japan. Shannon Frizzell has gone there as well, and Nepo Laulala is in France, along with Leicester Fainga Nuku. So those are the players that are definitely unavailable to Scott Robertson as he comes in and they look forward into the future. I think already looking at that graphic, there are certainly two or three areas that I think we need to speak about in more detail, which I'll get onto in a second. That second row, fly half and scrum half. But if I go on to the one other thing worth mentioning, those names in yellow are still available. So Sam Cane, Ardie Savea and Beauden Barrett. They are all off to play in Japan, but with Sam Cane, he's going to play in Japan this season, then will be available once we get into the middle part of 2024 for selection for the All Blacks. Beauden Barrett, we're still waiting on confirmation from New Zealand Rugby that he's going to sign a deal through to 2027, but that is the expectation, in which case I think we'll see something similar. He'll become available in the middle of the year, and Ardie Savea expected to be available as well. So the names in red are the ones that definitely are not there, and that paints quite an interesting picture for the positions that are absolutely key for New Zealand going forward and where the biggest question marks really are for this team. I should also say as well, it's not as bad as previous years. I think you look back at the 2015 World Cup, when you look at Dan Carter and Ma Nonu, Conrad Smith, Richie McCaw, you had legends of the game all across that team throughout the spine of it that left. On this occasion, don't get me wrong, when you're losing Aaron Smith and Sam Whitelock and Brodie Retallick, that's a huge amount of experience, but I don't think it's as severe in terms of the losses as New Zealand have had at the end of previous World Cup cycles. But let's get into the second row. What are the second row options then moving forward? Retallick and Whitelock, the most reliable, most experienced combination in the world, I think, probably, at international level, wasn't it? It certainly feels like they have been the main guys for the All Blacks for quite a while, and then Scott Barrett has since come in. So Scott Barrett is still there. He will continue to be there. I thought he was excellent in the World Cup, Scott Barrett. I thought he had a really, really good tournament. So he's still a good option there. You've got Tupu Vai, who again was part of that squad we saw involved at the World Cup, and I think will continue to be there. To me, at this moment in time, it seems like those will be the next two. Well, I say step up. Barrett's already there because he started the World Cup final, but those will be the next two to be that second row combination. And then where do you go after that? So you've had Josh Lord, who was in and around the World Cup training squad. He's got a couple of caps already, 22-year-old. Does he now get more of an opportunity? Does that open the door for him? Patrick Tuipulotu is a guy who's actually got plenty of caps. He's perhaps a more experienced option. If you're thinking about Retallick and Whitelock and the amount of caps that you're losing, Tuipulotu, a guy who has already been in the setup a fair bit, could be a decent option if you want to still have someone with a bit more experience to help some of the younger players come through. And are there any others? All Black fans, this is where you can comment down below. What do you make of it in terms of the other second row options that you think could be part of Scott Robertson's plans as we look ahead into 2024 and beyond? I've seen Zach Gallagher, who's uncapped, named Quinton Strange as another potential option who could come into the team as well. But you let me know in the comment section. But second row, I think undoubtedly is an area where we're going to see it freshened up a little bit, even though I think perhaps they do have a couple of players who are good and have good international experience that can fill the void for the time being. Let's get on to one of the other key areas then, and that's scrum half. So Aaron Smith goes, arguably the best kind of passing scrum half in the world. Most people I think would have Antoine Dupont as the best scrum half, but Aaron Smith has been excellent for a long, long time. So you lose Aaron Smith, you've got Cam Roigard and Finlay Christie who are there and were the two other players in the World Cup squad. Now Finlay Christie, as we got towards the end of the tournament, was deemed as the bench option by Ian Foster. I thought Cam Roigard though looked like the heir apparent in a lot of the World Cup. I think in an attacking sense he was brilliant, and any of you who watch Super Rugby will have seen a huge amount of that. The reason Ian Foster didn't go with him for kind of semi-final, final, for those knockout games, was he wants to see him improve his defence and possibly his passing accuracy as well. But I think Cam Roigard will still be there. The question, I suppose, is Finlay Christie, I guess, will still be there. I presume, have we seen the end of TJ Perenara? If we're looking towards the future, does he come back in? Experienced player at times previously, has been a really good option when he was back up to Aaron Smith. But has his time passed? Or then I see other names that I've kind of doing a bit of research. Folau Fakatava, who's got a couple of caps already, the 23-year-old. Is he someone that comes in? So 9, I think, is an area of, first of all, who's going to be the number one? Because I'd like, at this moment in time, to see it be Cam Roigard. But if there continue to be some of the concerns that they had at the World Cup, is it going to be Finlay Christie? And then who else comes in? Do you go with someone who's already got a fair bit of experience, or are there some younger players that are going to start to come into this All Blacks team? So 9 is absolutely crucial as well, as is fly half. Let's get on to it. So I've kept Beauden Barrett as still being there because of what I mentioned earlier in the video. Damian McKenzie, who's been a 15, could be a 10, was excellent in the World Cup, but has come back into that All Blacks setup. This is why I wouldn't be too concerned right now about the fly half position for the All Blacks, even though Richie Mo'unga, I think, over the last year to 18 months, really came into his own in terms of being an international fly half. There were moments in the World Cup, in some of those key games, in particular that victory over Ireland, where he was sensational, and I think he is a massive loss. But when you've got Beauden Barrett, when you've got Damian McKenzie, either of those can play 15, can play 10. They're still in a pretty good position. The question becomes, who are the next cabs off the rank to probably gain experience and look to come into the team? So Stephen Perafita has been capped already. He's played quite a bit of fullback as well, which again makes it interesting when talking about this sort of topic is, where do they see Barrett? Where do they see McKenzie? Where do they want those players to play? And that might determine who they fit in elsewhere. You've got Fergus Burke as well. He's mainly played fullback last season, but I know a few years ago he was kind of touted because he was the second string to Mo'unga at the Crusaders. He was touted as being a guy that could then eventually make his way into the All Blacks setup. He played a lot of second receiver from fullback, so I think he probably has the skill set to do it. Will it be him? And then elsewhere, I've seen all sorts of names mentioned for this. So this is definitely an area where those of you in New Zealand, those of you that watch a hell of a lot of Super Rugby can let me know. I've seen Cam Miller. Any others in there? Who could be the players that come in to play fly half for the All Blacks? So those are the 3 positions that I think are going to be top of the in-tray, top of the list for when Scott Robertson comes in. And I can't really get any further in this video without talking about just that. Coaching changes. This is a huge transition for the All Blacks. Now, I know there's a huge amount of excitement about Robertson coming in. His CV and what he did with the Crusaders speaks for itself, and I am very confident that he will do a great job. But nonetheless, it's the first real overhaul in terms of the coaching setup of the All Blacks that we've seen for maybe 20 years. If you think about it, that Graham Henry led into Steve Hansen, led into Ian Foster. There was always that next guy there who was part of the coaching setup to come in, and that changes now. So Scott Robertson comes in. Jason Ryan is staying as well as part of his coaching team, which I think is really important because the improvement in the front 5 of New Zealand, which was a major factor of them getting to that World Cup final, I think had a lot to do with him. So he stays. You've then got Leon McDonald, who will look after the attack. Jason Holland, who will be his assistant in terms of the attack. And then Scott Hansen as well, who will be on the defence. So, major coaching changes, Scott Robertson coming in, and there are some pretty big questions, I think, facing him other than the positional ones that I've already gone through. And one of those is captaincy. Now, Sam Cane, as I said at the top of the video, is available. He will miss all of the Super Rugby season, though. He won't be taking part in that. Is it now time for a change in captain? Maybe not, in which case this is a pretty short conversation, but I think there will be those who will entertain that idea. And if it is, then who gets your nod? Who should be the captain of the All Blacks moving forward? Now, a couple of names for you there up on screen, Ardie Savea and Scott Barrett. Ardie Savea just won World Player of the Year. He's been the best player for the All Blacks over the last few years, even when the team wasn't playing that well. But do you think that actually, do you know what, rather than putting too much responsibility on him, he's already a leader in the team, he's already a leader in terms of how he plays on the pitch, you don't need to add that extra burden onto his shoulders, just let him do his thing and be as brilliant as he has been over the last few years. But what about Scott Barrett? He's in the engine room. As I said already, he was excellent in the World Cup. I think he's continuing to grow into his own in terms of an international player. At this moment in time, he starts in that second row if he's fit as well. I think he could be quite a good option. Are there any others as well? What do you reckon? Changing captaincy, yes or no? If yes, who do you think should be the next captain of the All Blacks? Final couple of things that I wanted to finish on then was, first of all, Super Rugby, because this is going to be the other question which we don't really know the answer to, but if you look at the All Blacks, you look at 2024 and beyond and how successful they are, and I think one area of concern will be the quality of Super Rugby. And I know Ian Foster recently was speaking about this and saying that the competition itself maybe isn't that great, in a large part because the Australian teams are not particularly strong at the moment. But if you've got a competition that isn't necessarily preparing the core of your players for international rugby, then that could become an issue. In fact, it's a discussion at the moment, I think, in the English game as well, because as competitive and entertaining as the Gallagher Premiership is up here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's quite a drop-off from even Champions Cup rugby, certainly from international rugby. How well will that prepare English players? How well will Super Rugby prepare New Zealand players? And maybe not the guys that are there already, who've been there and done it, who know what it's like. But when I look at some of those positions and we talk about fly half, we talk about nine, we talk about players coming through, we saw it again at the World Cup. If you look at Australia and Eddie Jones taking Carter Gordon, young guy, really bright future, but not really ready to have the responsibility of being the fly half for the Wallabies. Could that eventually become an issue for New Zealand? If buts and maybes, but I do think it's something that is interesting and worth keeping an eye on. There's been a lot of questions in this video. There's been some negatives as well. Let me finish on the strengths, because let's not get it twisted. This New Zealand team is still very, very good. I think the youth and quality they've brought through in their front row stands them in good stead going forward. If they can maintain that platform, then they still have those backs out wide. And actually, they're relatively unchanged in their midfield and in their back three. I know we've spoken about 9 and 10. They've lost Lester Fainga'anuku, which is a real shame because he had a great World Cup, but they're relatively unchanged in other areas of that back line. And you could argue the same with the back row when you consider that Savea and Sam Cane will come back from Japan and be available. Shannon Frizzell has left, but they've still got plenty of other options in there as well. So there's a lot of strengths for this team still. They will still be one of the best teams in the world, I think, for the foreseeable future. There are some pretty big questions to answer, and I think it's fascinating to see how this coaching group will get on. But there's no question in my mind that they will be a real force over 2024 and beyond. What do you make of it? New Zealand looking into the future. Comment down below on anything that I touched upon in the video. Give me your thoughts, like the video, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, if you've made it this far, then hopefully I can earn your subscription off the back of that. Just hit subscribe and you won't miss a thing on the channel. But I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.